Hello, hello. We are live. There we go. There we go. There we go.
Hi,
Hello.
I still have my purple wig on from earlier.
I love it. I saw that in one of your pictures and I was like, I love that color.
Yes, thank you. It's fun.
It's
What are you
perfect.
up to?
I was actually just watching, it was Who Gets to
Oh,
Be
you were
an
watching
Influencer.
Midnight Mass, right?
I finished that probably around like 6 p.m. today.
How many episodes are there? Because I'm on episode 5.
I think there's 9 total.
Okay. It's a
It gets
lot.
weird. Yeah.
It's a lot.
I was telling my friends, I was like, I feel like that show kind of shows like how like you don't need a lot of convincing. If the shepherd tells the sheep to do something, like that show just goes, follow the shepherd. And I'm like, no. If it
Yeah.
seems crazy like that, like we've got to have enough common sense to say this is crazy.
But like, do we though? Like, do we? That's the problem.
I
And
think
a
some
long
people
time ago, I would have said yes, but honestly, after the last 4 years, I don't think we do, actually. There was a movie I watched once. It was like it was international because I like foreign films. But they were saying like, do you think it's possible for like the Holocaust to happen again? And everyone's like, no, no, no. And they did like a simulation for it, and it's like, yep, it actually would. Because at the end of the day, the conditions and the human brain that led to those conditions are all still very much here.
yeah, and it's just new circumstances with a different name, but it's the
Mhm.
same theory and the same concept, just redone. And it's crazy because you think about like I've seen so many posts that are like, "What would you have done in that situation?" And it's like, "What are you doing now?" Because it's
Yes,
what
right.
exactly what you'd be doing then.
Yeah, and I think people don't like to think that, but it's true. It's like what, well, for the most part, whatever your reactions are to things now is what your reaction would have been to things back then. And I think it's also one of the scary things about that whole putting your moral compass in the hands of someone else. Um, there was, I think it's called the Stanford Prison Experiment. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes.
Um, yes. So I saw like the experiment, and then I saw there's a really good movie version of it with like Forrest Whitaker and Adrian Brody, I think. But for those who are on who haven't seen it, it's basically they take these people to a prison. Half of them are prisoners, half of them are prison guards. And they give them like a strict set of rules. And they say to the prison guards, you just have to follow these rules. As long as you don't break these rules, you're good. Um, and you see as the movie progresses, they get like more aggressive and they do more and more horrible things. But because they were staying within the confines of the rules that were set, they thought it was totally okay. And I think that that happens a lot with people still. Like, as long as they feel like it's within the rules or something and someone told them they're allowed to do it, then it's okay. And I think it's just always very dangerous when you put your moral compass in the hands of someone else like that.
I think that we all somehow find justifiable reasons for why what we do is moral and okay. Uh,
You should watch it.
I almost feel like the internet has given us the capability to, even if we do something that is completely off our moral compass, we can find people somewhere that's like,
Yes.
you
Yep.
got it,
I
good
say that
job.
all the time. You can find someone to validate anything, anything. And so for me, on the plus side of it, why it's good is that like you really have no reason not to be yourself. Like what reason do you have not to be your whole self? Because if someone can do something horrible or someone can do something completely idiotic and they can still find a community of people to love and support them, whatever your like little thing is that you think about you, like your weight or your hobbies or your like quirkiness, whatever little thing that you think about you, trust me, you can find a community of people who love that about you instead of trying to like fake it so you fit in somewhere you don't belong. Like you can find if the others can find support, you can find support. There's literally no reason not to be yourself. Like
Yeah.
once I realized that, it was like, oh, we're off now. You're getting all of me, all my extraness. No more trying to be like sweet and calm. Like I'm giving you all of me, and if you can handle it, great. If not, goodbye.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely people who are naturally built to be followers and not they have no desire to have attention. They are okay with following uh
Hmm.
whoever wants to lead the way. And
Yeah.
sometimes it just takes someone with enough like charisma to be like, hey, follow me. And there are people out there that are like, yes, finally, someone to follow
Yes.
so I don't have to.
Yeah. Well, not even that. Like, so there's this YouTube video, and I reference it all the time because I love it. But it's about how important the first follower is, because like the person, and they explained it with these people dancing on a hill. So everybody's just kind of sitting down, and then like one person gets up and dances. The person who starts the movement. And they're like, that person is important because they start, but the person who's actually key is the first follower, the next person who gets up and dances with that person, because that's the person that shows everybody else that it's okay for them to start dancing too. Because when it's just one person, it's easy to be like, oh, what a weirdo, what an odd person out. But when it's two people, it's like, oh, okay, maybe it's a thing, and then they join in. So it's interesting that so then I was like, am I a first follower or a leader? I think I float between actually all of the above and
I think I
follower. It just
both.
depends.
Like
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
circumstances where like if it's not being done, like I will step up and do it. But I'm also one of those people when I see someone step up to like do something that's not being done, I'm like, here we go, let's do it.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
being that supportive person too.
Me too. Yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, I forgot. I wanted to ask you your opinion about something.
Yes.
So I watch Big Brother because I love Big Brother,
Mhm.
and one of the contestants has autism. But she didn't disclose it to the house members. And people lie all the time about like, oh, what's the solo clap theory? Well, I guess it's probably the same thing as the Hill theory. But anyway, so she didn't disclose it to the house members, and people lie about the professors all the time. That's not a big deal. But it was interesting because I was talking to Brooke, and I'm like, I get that she didn't disclose it because she wanted people to treat her normal.
Mhm.
But for me, it's kind of like the whole like I don't see color thing. Like you want to see color and then be able to work to see past that color to still see people as being valued and being quality. So for me, rather than not wanting people to know so they treat you normal, like I feel like no and also still treat me normal. Like I get for her personally why she didn't, but like I don't know, I feel like I wish more people would, and it's hard, it's scary, right? It's scary to put yourself out there like that. But I feel like that's the only way we get people to say, like, oh, okay, I see you despite all of the other.
Yeah. I feel like with that one, it probably leans heavier on like my side of being a minority group is because I do have the option to say, like, withhold that information from the world to
Yeah.
that if I don't tell people that I'm gay, like I can jump into the literal like class of you don't get discriminated against for being a man, for being
Yeah.
white, for being like middle
I
class.
mean, unless you talk to any white males lately, because they're apparently like the most discriminated class ever now, and nobody, it's
They,
so hard to be a white man now. And I mean,
uh,
not to, I'm sure there are parts of it. I don't mean to be dismissive of the struggles of it, because I do see sometimes them instantly getting painted as an enemy, which is not right either. But I still do not think they are. It's as bad as some of them are making it out to be.
I think that their struggle and I because I am part of those communities, I also deal with some of those struggles, but I think it's the struggle of being blinded by privilege, whereas other people are struggling with oppression. People in other groups, like white males, are unaware, and the world doesn't tell us those
Mhm.
things. Like we
Until
listen to
they do,
what's
then they start getting upset.
and then I think it's in that moment that you have to be aware that yes, your privilege blinds you, but you are also now in a day and age where these things are being presented to you. And if you choose to turn a blind eye, then you are choosing to oppress instead of solve the issue because you have position of power that you can use to make the world a better place. Uh, Not everyone's built to be an activist, but it's like in those situations where it's like someone lower than you in your business came up with an idea, you present that idea, it is your position to either accept that as your work or give it to
Acknowledge. Yeah.
acknowledge who came up with that idea. And yes, you're in a position of power to where you do get the opportunity to present, but you also should be giving the credit where it's due. And that also gives you credit as a leader.
Yeah.
It's different type of credit than saying, yeah, this was my work and getting pat on the back for that. But I think that you also should realize you do get a pat on the back for giving the credit where it's due.
Yeah, I think I respect that even more. Like I always try to give credit where it's due. A, because then you have people who want to work with you. And B, it helps to like bring your friends up too with you. I was just telling that to someone the other day. Like I want to succeed and I want all my friends to succeed. A, because I want their dreams to come true. But B, because like as great as it is getting into like important rooms, it feels even better when the room is filled with your friends. So like why would you not want to bring your friends with you to be successful as well?
Yeah, I've actually talked about this in my live that I did with my friend KJ, and her and I actually talked about how a lot of times we give our own credit away. So like
Mm,
if it's an idea that I came up with, I almost feel sometimes in certain spaces my opinion isn't valid. So I say it's from someone else and give
mm,
my my knowledge away and the credit to someone who isn't
yeah,
even like I won't give a specific name because I don't want people to go, "Hey, remember when you gave
yeah,
Drummond credit?"
yeah,
But like I do say, "Oh, one of my friends and I were talking and he came up with this idea," and I'm like, "Actually, I did. I don't know why
so
I
you
did
don't
that."
like to say that you came up with the idea?
I think it comes from like a long lifetime of like being attacked for being too smart or
Mm,
my family like discredit everything I've said. So like I felt like if someone else said it, my
yeah,
family would like accept it as fact instead of challenging it because it's my opinion.
yeah,
So I would give it to someone else to give it a valid backing, whereas I had to take that time to realize that that's not a healthy way of going about things, and
yeah,
you're because I came up with it, it's still valid. And if someone challenges it, then they're challenging my idea, and there should be a discussion about it, not,
right.
well, it's discredited. And the show I was actually just watching on, I think it was Hulu, it was about the black creators who started their own house because like there's a lot of famous TikTok houses being started where like a lot
Oh
of
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I just
yeah,
finished watching that and I was just trying to gain perspective, and it was very interesting to kind of hear like this one guy was talking about how he created a challenge and all the big TikTokers were doing it, but they never gave him credit for it. So like they all grew because
hmm,
of the trend, but his account didn't get any attention because of it.
yeah,
And even when he'd go and be like, "Hey, thanks for like doing my challenge, love it," like all these other content creators' comments were getting thousands of likes, and his just didn't exist in the algorithm. And that's
yeah,
I think that that's something that we have to learn to overcome because the problem is like it doesn't matter where we start with a new platform with different communities, like the societal norm finds its way to exist in all those spaces again, like the LGBT community. Like
yeah,
if you take away the LGBT and just say the world again, we still have white men at the top, we still have, you go down
yeah,
the chain of rank. And I'm just like, we have to start looking at it at the root and fixing it because social media platforms don't become racist. It
right.
was created without the intent of solving that issue. So, of course, the problems of the world today are going to exist on the platforms of the world today.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great point because so often, like when people talk about like like systemic racism and racism in different places, they'll be like, oh, like it's just not working the way it's supposed to, or I can't believe it's becoming. It's like, no, it's actually working exactly the way it's supposed to, and that's the problem. Like you have to figure that out and fix it before you can actually fix the problem. But it's hard, like you said, when people have a privilege and then also don't recognize that that privilege is there, it's hard to give it up. And it's hard even to say, like, I benefit from this thing, especially when you know it's not anything you in particular did.
Yeah. I I think it's really hard because it's never introduced as a topic of discussion for people to discuss in a normal education way.
Mm,
I think it's always brought up in a time where emotions are high and guards are up. And I think
yeah.
that makes it almost impossible for people to even discuss that. And I think
Yeah,
that,
they instantly get defensive.
yeah, because no one, I don't think there's anyone who ever discredits the fact that people work hard and get places, but there's
Right.
that certain people have to work a billion times harder to get to that same equal playing field. And I mean, for me personally, like I thought as long as I didn't say anything hateful to people, I didn't like judge people that were different than me, I thought that I was in the clear. I didn't realize that just because I'm standing in a room with a diverse group of people, that some of those people fought way harder to stand beside me than when I just walked into a room because I was allowed to be there. And
Mm.
it took me a while to realize that just because we're standing at equal playing fields does not mean the journey was anywhere close to equal.
Yeah, at all. It takes people a while to realize that. Even like when you talk about like affirmative action, and people are like, "Oh, it's so horrible that certain slots are saved for certain groups of people." It's like, yeah, but like they have three spots and you have like seven. So how much harder do they have to work, and how much of like a higher level do they have to perform at? Like their number one is at the same level as your number seven. So like, what does that, tell you? But I think people just don't always realize it. And I actually, so shameless plug. Actually, you're my first official plug. So last year during during like the George Floyd stuff, it was really hard for me because it was just like an emotional time. But I also grew up in the suburbs, like where you're like white suburbia, upstate New York. Loved it. But like, I would have friends and stuff reaching out to me because people like want more information to talk about stuff. And it was overwhelming for me, but it also like just with everything going on with George Floyd, I felt just kind of helpless. Um, which doesn't sit well with me. So ended up coming up with like a course for them for us to like sort of learn and unpack like some of the things. And it went really well. So I made it into an actual course. It's like an 8-week course. It's called You Don't Know What You Don't Know About Racism. Because ultimately, I think that's the problem. I think the problem, like, yes, there are hateful people out there. There are racist, hateful, awful people. But I think a majority of the people in the middle don't realize how much implicit bias they have. And they don't realize how deeply rooted racism is into the system. So, of course, they're going to say it's not existing, it's not real, I don't see it. And for the most part, I wish they would at least believe the people telling them, believe the experiences. And there's still going to be those people who will never listen and they don't care. But I do think that there's a good chunk in the middle that would be open to learning more if they weren't in a space where they had to feel defensive or, yeah, defensive is the main word. So I made the course. I'm going to be launching it soon and hopefully it goes well.
That's super exciting. Yeah, it's so hard because the people who are able to teach that have an emotional connection to the reason why they're teaching it is
Mhm.
because they want to see change, and that change means change for them and change for everyone behind them. And that when you're faced with people who on the other side of the spectrum, on my side of the spectrum, get frustrated because no matter and I went through this where it's like no matter how many aha moments I had and I tried to relate or get you to see that I was seeing a new perspective, like I was still a billion degrees off of understanding it to a level that makes people realize like, wow, this person is coming a long way. Because
Yeah.
the problem is like I have privileges or privilege filters that I don't even know I have. And then the people teaching also have the filters that their life have put into their existence. And we haven't lived the same life. So it's almost impossible for us to understand each other's perspectives. Because even if we stood next to each other, like through our entire life, like our
Right.
existences made every like journey a very different like journey for each of us. And it's like, it's so hard to talk about it.
Well, it's hard to talk about it because it's emotional. I think it's also hard to talk about it because, and not that I'm doing anything like groundbreaking, because there are other people who have courses like this as well. But I think a lot of times people teaching it, like you said, are really involved and impassioned in it. So they want to get right into it and they really skip the basics. Like there are people who deny racism not because they are horrible people, but they just don't see it. And so kind of like what you were saying, there are privileges that you have that you don't see. I talk about it all the time. Like I had suburban privilege for sure. And it's sometimes difficult for me to talk about. It's getting easier now because I talk about it more, but like I had to unpack a lot of that. And luckily I'm black, so I had to once I got out of that like very space. Like, and that's the problem also with people who are like, well, I have a black friend. And my brother and I have talked about it. It's like if we were your black friend that you had, like we weren't really helping you because we weren't tapped into the blackness. Like we were more tapped in to the white side. And I used to say that too. Like for the longest time, if I had to enter like a room full of all black people or a room full of all white people and you made me choose, for the longest, I would have picked the room full of all white people as a more comfortable space for me because of how I grew up and where I grew up. It was one of those things where, like, yes, when I walked in, it might be like, but I knew once I opened my mouth and we started talking, it'd be like, oh, okay, blah, blah, blah. But I knew it was always the exact opposite in black spaces. It was like, oh, I walk in and I'm good, but the minute I start opening my mouth, it's like, oh, you talk like a white girl. And so having to deal with that made me more comfortable in the other space. Now, I'm pretty comfortable in both spaces, thankfully, but I think that's what makes me uniquely qualified, if I may, to teach a course like that because it is a journey I had to go through. Like I'm not just, oh, I'm a black person who like wants you to understand racism. I'm a black person who had to understand racism myself. Like I used to say things like, well, I'm black and they're black. Why don't they just work harder? Or like and things. And I truly believed it, and it wasn't from a mean spot. It was just like that was the world as it was presented to me. So when I talk to or about people like, and I mostly say like suburbia, just because that's more my target area, because that's where I grew up. I'm like, it's not like they're sitting there getting like black people are awful, like pamphlets and marches. Like it's just the way that it's presented in the news and media, and music. Like the way that it's presented to us really creates a very different picture and a different reality for them of the black existence. And that's why it's so important to have representation and to tell people like, hey, we're not a monolith. There's all these different types of black people. But I do think that because I had to walk that journey and like really get over myself and realize like there is really a racial problem in this country, and just because like I'm one black person who's okay, but it's only because I had all these privileges of being in the suburbs. And even then I can still give you an example of where my race was a non-problem problem. I still have those examples, but I feel like I can at least like have those conversations, and I think that it helps with people just not being as defensive, I think, with me, because they don't have to defend that they thought that way, because I'm like, hey, I thought that way, and I had to educate myself to get past it.
Yeah. I think that everyone has something that they can offer. I think that everyone has walked different journeys that have probably given them experiences that they can use to help educate other people. Because there are people that will say one thing and goes in one ear and out the other for people. And then
Mhm.
someone with a different circumstance says the exact same thing and it sticks and people
Yep.
understand it. And I think that the more people that do that, I think the better we'll be. But it's such a hard topic, and I think that people avoid uncomfortable, unfortunately. And for some
Because it feels good
people,
to be happy. Like sometimes it feels good to just not talk about the serious stuff, but like sometimes you got to talk about it because that's the only way you fix it and you address it.
yeah. And it was interesting because in the episode I was just watching, uh, one of the guys in the show, he was like mixed. So he had a white mother and a black dad.
Mhm.
And he was arguing with the other people in the house, talking about like he doesn't focus on racism, he doesn't focus on like the disadvantages that his skin color brings him because he's got to work, and that's a waste of his energy focusing on that. And they were just trying to get him to understand that like for them, like that is a focus because that is something that they have to overcome to be seen. And he was struggling. I
Yeah,
think that he probably was in a very similar boat to you, where he was probably surrounded without people talking about the disadvantages as much. So for him,
yeah,
it was easier to allow his privilege to blind him to some of the obstacles that were in his way that he
yeah,
might be bumping into, and just being like, you know what, I just need to work harder.
yeah,
Whereas he's not fully aware that if he were to remove like the skin tone and jump onto the next level, his co-creators over here on the white side of things never have to bump into those things. They're just like a clear shot to the finish line.
yeah.
And
Well, I mean,
that's what
colorism plays like a huge part in it as well. But even like you were saying, like there's those blinders that you don't even necessarily realize when you're in that environment. Because like I said, I would have back then been like, it's just about how hard you work. Like I'm treated just like everybody else. My skin color doesn't matter. I blah 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 blah. And on some levels, that's true. But then at the same time, especially since educating myself on things more, I can look back and be like, oh, that's what that was. Like even because I was a pretty good kid, but I would remember like the times when I would get in trouble, feeling like I was punished harsher than my counterparts, and I, because I'm always whatever, would be like, oh, it's just because I'm such a good kid that they're extra disappointed that I did this bad thing, and that's why they're punishing me harder. Like that's what I would tell myself. I was like, oh, it's just because it's such unexpected bad behavior for me. That's why I'm getting punched harsher. Now, though, that I'm educated on it and I realize that Black children are punished at a harsher level because of their skin tones and different environments and things like that. Now I'm like, oh, okay, but you don't realize it when you're in the situation and when you're in it all the time, especially if you grew up around it. And you also don't want to be accusatory of the people you grew up being friends with who loved you and being like, ugh, you might be a little racist. And that's the problem with even throwing out, being racist. I'd say prejudice. I say you have implicit biases because of a systemic racism, because I don't think a lot of people are specifically racist. I think there's a lot of implicit biases that people are unaware of that they need. But I mean, I also think that we're at a point now where you don't really get to use that as an excuse for a lot of things, because there was a long period of time where there were things that were talked about just in the Black community, and we didn't really talk about it with the other community, like injustices, things like that. But like, at least, I mean, starting as far back as Trayvon Martin, but definitely since George Floyd, like, what's up. So at this point, people pretending like they don't know is truly a choice.
Yeah, I think that it you have to realize like the voices that are speaking on topics and the voices that people listen to, because I when I moved to West Virginia, I went to a church in the middle of nowhere, and it was with my boyfriend's family. At the time I was a friend. They didn't know that I was dating him,
Yeah.
but they were speaking about like the Middle East in that church, and I was just blown away because for me, I had already lived in New York City. So I had already been very exposed to very diverse communities. And when I moved to West Virginia and heard the way that they spoke of a community of people that were just different from them, and how they removed all like human traits
Man,
when they
yep.
spoke of this community. And it's almost like they could hear it on the news if they switched it on, but they only hear what is affirming to their already belief system. So it
Mhm.
doesn't matter if it's on the internet or
Right.
anything these days. Like if their community says one thing, then it's like they hear blah 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 terrorist, and they're like, so the
Yeah.
terrorist, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
I mean, and that goes full circle to to our conversation is like really, truly, you can just believe what you want. Like you'll always find validation. You'll always find validation. You more so, I feel like than ever. And it's interesting because I feel like people always said it, but and I know it sounds bad, but it really wasn't until like witnessing how many people like dug into willful ignorance over the past 4 years, and how many people like dug into like just ignoring like what I would consider basic facts that I'm like, wow, you really can create your own universe. So I took their negative, turned it into a positive, and I'm like, I'm going to create my own mental universe where I am amazing. And that's that. And no one can tell me otherwise. Because, like, why not? You know?
yeah, I had a lot of conversations with people that they're like, I just turn off the news. I don't have to deal with it. And I'm like, that must be nice to be able to ignore laws being passed, ignore news of people being shot and killed, because like you live in such a place of privilege that you never have to think that it could possibly be you.
Hmm.
Like, I remember how it felt because I used to live in Florida. I used to go to the Pulse nightclub all the time. And I had nightmares every single night after that because, like, I could envision myself being there and seeing people shot on the ground around me. And that was such like a helpless feeling that like that's what I feel when I see other people, because it's like that safety that it's a false sense of safety anyway,
Yeah.
because at any point any of us could be in a position of unsafe circumstances. But when it's your community on the TV, when it's people that look like you, or believe what you believe or live the way you live, like it's all your like comfort blankets and security just disappears and you feel so exposed to the world. And before, when you walk out and people are looking at you, you don't really notice it because you're
Yeah.
living your life in your comfort. But when something like that happens and you see someone who's like reflective of who you are on the news as someone who's been killed or shot in some way, like all of a sudden now you notice people look at you when you walk into a space and you're
Yeah.
like, what are they thinking? Like, and I would imagine that's how people felt on 9/11 when it came to being part of like the Islamic group of people that lived in the United States. Like that's
Have you
something
ever
that,
read The Kite Runner, by the way? If you
yes,
haven't, you should.
I
It's so
love
good.
that book.
Yeah,
Yes.
you
I've
too.
read multiple books by that author.
Oh, I should look into more of those. I just read that one. And that just always has stuck to my mind because it changed my view on like terrorism and how the people in that country deal with it as well. So and I wouldn't even mind certain people turning a blind eye to what's going on. Because sometimes I get like that where I'm just like I can't take in the negativity of the world. I wouldn't mind it if those people still like were well, actually no, two things. I wouldn't mind it if they would then also keep their mouths shut because a lot of people love to talk without doing any like research, or they hear little clips, they like read headlines and form all these opinions and never actually base it with fact. So I feel like if you don't want to know, like if you don't really want to know, also don't talk. And then two,
Yes.
I feel, oh wait, I think I lost my second point. Oh no, two, I was gonna say two, I wish that they would still be able to be empathetic to what else is going on around. Like I feel like a lot of the people who are anti some of like the more social justice things. I know people like to say they're political things. I think certain human right things aren't political, but so we'll just call them social justice issues. I think that a lot of the times the people who are opposite of it also turn a blind eye to it. They're like, oh no, it's not a problem. And then when people want to say, like, it is a problem, here's examples, here's pictures, here's statistics, they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Well, of course it's easy to say it's not a problem if you don't want to talk about it. But like, like if you're gonna say, oh, I don't want to talk about it, but you're like, I know there's a problem, but I don't want to take that in right now. I feel like that is completely different than I'm gonna say it doesn't exist and then I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to get the facts that prove otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I kind of took like a hiatus off of YouTube in 2020 was because I knew that there were things that mattered more than the content that I was making. And I didn't have the amount of time to do the research that would give any topic justice of
Mhm.
coming out of my own mouth. So I didn't talk about it. That didn't mean that I wasn't learning about it, but I was like, I'm going to learn first before I
Yeah,
speak because I didn't want to create content and pretend like that wasn't happening, but I
yeah,
also didn't want to create content that was ignorant and did more harm than good for a movement that I wasn't really a part of because
yeah,
LGBT and Black Lives Matter, there's a lot of similarities, but in one, I am a like person of that community, and another,
yeah.
I'm an ally. And in this side, I needed to learn my role as well as educate myself on the journey that that movement has been through to be where it's at today.
I would imagine that that was hard for you and other content creators like you to navigate because, on one hand, like I just said, like if you don't know, don't talk about it. But at the same time, I'm sure people come after you for not talking about it, like, oh, you don't care. And I always also hate whenever there's something like major going on in the world and like people create funny content or talk about something else. And then people are in the comment section like, don't you know this horrible thing has happened? It's like, yes. And we appreciate having a source to not think about that horrible thing. Like at the height, and actually, I almost want to bring it back because I enjoyed it, but it was like for a couple months on Fridays, I would only do positive content. So it was Feel Good Fridays. Like I wouldn't look at any posts about any social justice stuff. I wouldn't like take any of it, and it was only sharing like positive and funny things. Oh yeah, I would do that on Fridays, and then I would take Saturdays and Sundays off. I was really on top of my game back then. I would be on social media like Monday through Thursday. Friday was like fun, and then I would take Saturdays and Sundays off. Um, but yeah, because you do still need that fun content, and I feel like we so often want to be like, "Oh, you don't care," but unless you're following someone all the time and know what they're doing, you don't really know what they're doing. And we do need the spaces for fun and for levity and for, like I don't want to think about this horrible problem. I want to hear positive vibes and, things like that. So I feel like that space is created or it needs to be created, but then it's also frustrating, I'm sure, feeling like you get attacked for not standing up or saying something.
I felt horrible because my sister's birthday was June 2nd and George
Mm.
Floyd happened like in
May
May
30th, yeah,
before.
like May 30th, I think.
And my sister shared her birthday photos that she had a friend do for like turning 30. She did like a dirty 30 shoot.
Oh, cute.
And I posted on my story and I was just like, "Oh, happy birthday to my sister. I love you so much." And she started getting tons and tons of like hate messages from people and they're like, "Of course this white girl thinks it's appropriate to be putting on a pretty little dress and drinking her wine and celebrating her birthday while the rest of us are out here fighting for our lives." And
You know what makes me, not to interrupt, but you know what really sort of makes me livid about that is because the people, first of all, how are you a good person if you're sending people hate mail and things like that, but still thinking you're a good person? I've never understood that logic. But what really annoys me is that the people in the DMs saying those things are very rarely, if ever, also the people doing the work. Because those of us who are like posting about it and talking about it and calling people and raising awareness, protesting, we're not sitting around in people's DMs saying, oh, why are you in a dress? We're fighting for our lives. Like we're actually doing stuff. And it drives me nuts the people who want to talk about things that should be done and how horrible stuff is and how other people aren't doing anything. Meanwhile, they're not doing anything either. They're just using other people's negative experience for the clout to stand on and say something. It's like instead of messaging you and your sister angry messages, message your senator to pass a law or bill. Like do something productive with that time. Sorry, it's such a pet peeve of mine.
yeah, I mean, I social media I think comes to a point where I think that we
Hurt
assume
people hurt. Yeah.
that the things that we do online matter a little bit more than they actually do. With
Yeah.
things online can matter if there's action to back the things that are happening online. But if you
Yep.
are just like, if you can post tons of things online and then go to bed and think that you've accomplished something, uh, the truth is, like, if you don't go out into your community to create the change that you are begging for to come on your
Yeah.
platforms, like, it's not making as much of a
Like
difference
just
because
having loud opinions online does not do anything. Like, thank you for adding to the noise. And maybe, you say insightful things and, so I love to give my opinions online too, but it's like, what actions are you putting behind those words? And I feel like if half the people walked the walk of the talk that they talk, we would be so much further ahead right now.
yeah, I think I've seen phenomenal, amazing people do amazing things, and I've watched the change happen around them. And those are the type of people that I try to connect with. Those are the people that I can see that the passion is there. Whereas, I mean, everyone has the right to be angry at the discomfort and the unrest that exists out there.
Yeah.
But, like, be aware that every action has consequences. And like I was saying earlier, where I was like, I didn't want to post something that would harm the movement. Everyone has the ability to move something backwards or forwards. You've got
Yeah.
to be really careful because you can live an experience and not be educated enough to speak on the experience. Because to educate others, to get others to see a perspective that is not their journey, requires a tact that not everyone has. It's a skill
Mhm.
that you have to figure out and get better at over time.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, just because you have a voice and can speak doesn't necessarily mean you should get on a stage and speak to a large crowd, because
Yeah.
you could do a lot more harm than good. And I think that before you put yourself in front of a large audience, that you should kind of get some opinions from
Mhm.
other people that are doing it and have done it longer, because they might be like, you know what, like,
Maybe
say,
not.
like, calling an entire group of people this horrible thing right at the beginning of your speech might shut their ears for the rest of the hour that you speak.
Yeah.
It was pointless to
Well, I
spend
think part
time
of the I
speaking.
think part of the problem is that I feel like it's like a saying or something, but I mean overall I think that people who like I often like even when I know about a topic, I still will double check to make sure. Like there are so many times I'm in the middle of typing where I'm like, well, let me Google that real quick. Let me just double check just to make sure. The problem is that we tend to be more quiet. Oh, my battery's gonna die soon. But we tend to be more quiet than the people who aren't fact checking, who aren't double checking, who are just speaking. You know what I mean? Like we're the type to be like, okay, do I want to say this to a large audience? Like, is my voice needed? Or like, what type of impact am I going to have? Versus someone who's just spewing nonsense will gladly say whatever to whoever. And like, they're always like the loudest voice because they don't care. Like, they just word vomit.
Yeah. And I mean, that's with the news as well. Like, there are news companies that would rather be the first to say it than be the more factual news channel.
Well, I
And
feel like we've completely lost fact. Like we have really turned to sensationalism. Like it's all about the clickbait, which is horrible because no one reads the articles. Do you know how many times I have messaged? Wow, we're really getting into my pet peeves tonight. But do you know how many times someone has posted something and then I click on it, I read the article, and then I leave a comment, message, asking something about it or referencing it, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't read it." Then why are you sharing it? Like, why are if you did not read that and you don't know what you're putting out into the world, why are you sharing it? And why are you judging it to be shared just off of the title? I can't stand it.
yeah, I mean, because I've grown on social media, and I mean, I post quotes from different people, like, and I've gotten tagged by people because I shared a Republican's quote. The quote was amazing, but it was
Yeah.
by a Republican who didn't have the best views of the LGBT community.
Yeah.
And I was attacked for that, to where now I do, like, even if I share someone's post, I look at the, like, comments that they put underneath of it, how then I
Hmm.
look on their page to make sure that their
Yeah.
whole page actually has like a similar message. And I've realized that I've had to put so much more thought into everything before I share it, because I don't want to accidentally move something forward that should be left in the dark, because it's that type of
It's
work
out
that I'm
there.
putting
But I
out.
mean, and that's the thing though, is that you are doing what everyone should be doing, which is putting more thought into it. But the problem is so many people are not putting thought into it. They're just like seeing and sharing, seeing and sharing. That sounds good and sharing, and not realize the harm that they're potentially spreading because of it.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you have to be more aware of. I think that last year really taught me the lesson of, like, before last year, I don't think I put as much thought behind my posts. I think that I just kind of shared it. Whereas last year, I started to think, like, maybe I should ask some questions before I post this. Maybe I need another perspective. Like, before I started sharing my YouTube videos again, I had a group of friends that we just kind of came together, and I would unlist my video, share it with all my friends, have all of them watch it and give an opinion. And if there was someone that was like, that could be taken down the
Yeah,
wrong road, that's not really a message that would promote what I think you're trying to promote, I would just delete it. I didn't
yeah,
even want, and that was a lot of work to record and
it
edit and
is.
all of that.
Yeah.
But if it was something that someone in my friend group thought that wasn't going to promote the message I was trying to promote, I was like, it's got to go.
It's better to save yourself on the end, save yourself time on the end. I think it's also interesting, like, because you're right, like it's more work, right? It's more work and it's more thinking. And I think that there are people in this world who are like okay with that. Like we don't mind doing more thinking and we don't mind learning. And then there's some people who consider like learning past a certain age like it's an attack on you. Like, oh, like if you dare to say they didn't know something or they don't know something, it's like, but no one knows everything. Like nobody knows everything. Even very intelligent people don't know everything. And some people are just really closed off to learning and even like mock learning. I thought it was interesting earlier when you were saying like you didn't want to be like teased for being like the smart person, and you know, like I've been through that. Or like times where I would just like know the answer and be around people, or like hear people talking about something and be so wrong but not say anything because I didn't want them to be like, oh, there she goes, Miss Know It All. Because there really are just some people who just don't like they take it as a personal offense that you're intelligent or that you're questioning something. And I feel like that's awful because how are you going to learn? Like, I
Yeah.
love
I mean,
learning new stuff.
I've experienced where people have gone out of their way to knock my life over because I proved to them that I was smart in another way. Like maybe I one-upped them by correcting something that they said, and then it became their personal like vendetta to like make sure that they messed my life up. So I
Yeah.
learned to just be like, you know what, I'm just not going to say anything because
Yeah.
I don't need my life being stirred up. It's it's hectic enough, and I was just like, I'm gonna pull back. I'm just gonna let them post whatever
Well,
they want
that's been
to
a
post.
lesson that I've had to learn because, and I think we talked about it on one of our lives. Like, I very much have like the, even if you impact one, you're impacting others mentality. So, like, I really would give myself to like having these conversations. Like, you know, like, okay, if someone wants to have an exchange and we can like learn a little bit. But I've really come to realize that like some people just want to waste your time. So I have my certain things where like I won't waste my time on, I won't do multiple replies, and I just say okay because I think you start to learn who is engaging with you to truly have a conversation and who is engaging with you just because they want to tell you that you're wrong and they're right. And like those people are just not worth wasting your time because you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I've I've plenty and plenty of people. Like I had someone, I shared a quote from a song, and I put underneath of it the artist's name that sang the song, and someone went under it and like commented like the person who actually wrote the song
Mhm.
versus the artist. And I was like, is that a fact that you knew, or is that
Right.
something that you were like, oh, that's the artist, that's not the like
The
person who
writer.
wrote it?
Yeah.
Did you go and Google it just to prove me wrong? Because I was
Yeah.
like, it's it's just as easy to misquote someone, but I was like, in that moment, were you just trying to prove me wrong, or were you actually
Okay.
like trying to give credit to a person that wrote the song? And I was just
Yeah.
like, Well, if you want to be like really nitpicky, it was written by 6 different people and you
Right,
only
tag them all.
listed the main person. So like you can constantly try to negate someone's statement or like be polite and
Well, and that's the other thing too is you can constantly try to get people to validate your statement and validate your truth, or you could just say what you said and let them pick up what they pick up from it. And that's been hard for me sometimes. So I hate being misunderstood because communication is so important to me. But I've learned, like I was saying before, like there are those people who are just they want to misunderstand you. They're not actually trying to understand you, and I'm just wasting my time. So now I just acknowledge that like I know I'm careful with my words and I know that I mean to say what I meant to say. And if someone, tells me something back where I'm like, oh wow, I genuinely didn't mean that, like, or something like maybe I'll correct it. But other than that, if they're just like nitpicking stuff, I'm like, all right, nitpick away. I moved on to the next thing. That was like me, like, I have so much going on and so many things. I'm like, you're nitpicking something for me that was like 2 weeks ago, but okay.
yeah.
Because some people just like that. They just like to be difficult.
Yeah, I for a long time I was allowing those types of people to impact my ability to do what I wanted to do online with my social media.
Hmm.
And now for Instagram, I have it to where like if you post anything negative on my post, I will restrict your profile so your comments will never show up again for anyone else's.
Oh, so
Uh,
instead of blocking them, you just restrict it?
yeah, so they can still
Because
see it.
I'm heavy with my blocking it. You know what's so bad though? Like I'm so bad at blocking that like if I'm on someone's page and someone comments something like out of the world ridiculous and I go to the page, I'm like blocked. Even if we didn't interact, I'm like I never want to cross paths with you based
I
on
know.
like whatever horrible thing you just said. So I will just go and block them.
Yeah, there are some people that it's better to just be prepared ahead of time to remove it because I mean, you might comment on your friend's page later on down the road, and that person
Mhm.
see you, and then now your page is on their list of pages they're going to troll. So,
Yeah. And trolls are the worst. I have for my comments, I have restricted comments on all of them, like just certain words. So I feel like I at least slow the trolls down because I'm sure a few of the insults are like, oh, not that one. Oh, not that one. And then sometimes they make it through, but for the most part, I
yeah,
think that's why I get a lot less, which is nice.
I
Because
think I've
social
got
media is
like
wonderful and awful.
I think I've got like over 300 words in that like restricted box that you can do.
Really?
So
Yeah.
it's like I don't want any of these words. Like I just don't want to.
Yes. Let it go. Be like
Yeah.
Elsa. Well, speaking of letting go, I think I have like 10% battery left. But I'm glad we got to have this random Wednesday night talk. I know we didn't even get to the cards. So is it a game?
So this is more for like life coaches here. So
Okay.
all it is like a box full of words. You can probably go on Google and type in like core values and get a list of
Mm.
words. But you just like go through and what you do is like you go through the whole deck and just kind of pick words. And I know they're backwards because we're
No,
online.
I can read them. So like what would I do? Like would you show the card and I would tell you like the first word that comes to mind?
So you would literally just put, so like if inclusion is one of your words, then you would just
Hmm.
sit it down and the
Oh.
next word would just go in the pile if you don't really identify with it. And then
Okay.
you kind of group them based upon like, because you're trying to get it down to three, because your core values, it's easiest to focus on three.
Mhm.
And you can just kind of move them around until you
Thanks,
realize
Rachel.
a lot of words are very similar to each other, like inclusion, equality. Like you could group
Yeah.
those and give them one word to represent that group of words. But like
Okay.
this brand does a lot of different stuff. I also have like they have the icebreaker one, which I
Are
think
those all the questions? I love those.
and
Yeah.
they're very interesting questions. Like I thought that they would be very
That's
appropriate.
what we should do in our monthlies. We should ask those questions. 'Cause I love games. I'm such like a game person. But I love those like icebreaker ones. I think I have one. Well, I think that one's relationships. It's like mentally stimulate me and it's all like interesting questions. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, these like some of them are like would you rather? They've got them like into sections. I don't know if you can see the colors,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I
but
want to play.
but
Well,
they've
not
got
now
like
because I have to go. But
yeah,
we should schedule a time to play because that looks fun.
yeah. It's my sister and I sat here and did it and it was very interesting, but I've wanted to do something like with this and get like at least 4 people on a live
Yeah.
with diverse backgrounds that are like none of us are the same, and
Yeah, that would be fun.
get answers and then like explain why that's our answer, because I think that that would be like a fun way to show people that there's 4 of us, maybe we're all the same, maybe
Yeah.
we're all content creators, maybe we all host our own shows,
Yeah.
but our answers will always be different and there will be different reasons behind it.
There's another deck. I think that's the one my brother used for Christmas. I think it's called like We're Not Strangers or something like that. That's a really good one too. But that one seems cool. So, all right, well, let me know when you plan it because I want in.
Definitely.
I think
I
that'll
will
be fun.
definitely let you know.
Okay. Well, it was fun chatting. Have a good
Yeah.
night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.